Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I think it's not too late to say Selamat Hari Merdeka, because we also have Hari Malaysia coming up. So I typically like to say that these 2 weeks are the 2 weeks in the year when we think about what we can do for our country. So, okay, I have 2 iPads here. Let's start with the panelists that we have here. This morning, we have a very good group of panelists who bring respective expertise to the panel. Can we just start with some introductions? But before we do that, can we pull up the poll question on Slido? We have one question for you guys to participate in because it's got to be somewhat two-way here. So let's see. The question. Do we have the question on Slido now? Yes. So please use your phones. Which factor do you believe will most significantly shape the future of Malaysia's real estate market in the next 5 years? I think you can select up to 2. Demographic changes, is it global economic trends, technological innovations, regulatory developments, and or is it environmental sustainability? So while we wait for the answers to come in, can I go to the panelists? Can each of you briefly introduce your role and how it relates to the real estate sector in Malaysia? Let's do a quick round robin before we get started with the hard questions. Yes, Mr. Lee first.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi. My name is Heng. I'm the ED, Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Research Center of Private Think Tank of Chinese Chamber. I'm a trained economist from Bank Negara. I have 40 years of experience working in central bank, various positions, and also working in broking research, investment bank, and also the last one is the research center. My research interests cover socio-economics, financial, and also industrial development. I'm delighted to be part of the panel. I'm looking forward to contribute effectively in today's panel, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And Charlie.
Morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Koh, CEO and founder of Urbanmetry. We are a city data company covering Southeast Asia at the moment, hopefully globally soon. I was trained as an urban planner, feels very strongly about sustainability and future trends and technology, so hopefully we'll have a robust discussion today. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. And Christophe.
Good morning, everyone. Christophe Vicic. I'm the Chief Growth Officer for GLL in Malaysia. 15 years in real estate. Was in Philippines before and in Russia before. I'm passionate about technology, digital transformation. And my role in Malaysia is really to bring what we call the new asset classes, alternative, etc., focus on ESG, sustainability, and really being an advocate from a real estate point of view on building a resilient real estate, inclusive, sustainable, and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. So just to be very clear, our panelists here, they have various perspectives. Mr. Lee will he'll cover the economic perspective. Charlie, an expert in demographics because of the analytics that you do. And Christophe will bring in the international investors' perspective. So I was told that today's panel, our topic is market landscape, growth drivers and trends. And then I was given this brief. So let's see, what are we supposed to cover today? We're supposed to explore key drivers and trends shaping Malaysia's real estate landscape and examine global economic shifts, demographic changes, as well as sectoral growth prospects. So I'm throwing a lot of phrases here. We're also supposed to discuss strategies to balance innovation with sustainable urban developments and navigate the complexities of economic policies in today's environment. So that's a lot to cover. We have another 50 minutes to go. So let's get started. Do we have the results of the poll? Right, okay. So everyone thinks that global economic trends, 45% think that global economic trends will be the main factor shaping Malaysia's real estate market in the next 5 years. Demographic changes come in a close 40%, and then regulatory and policy developments. Right, and environmental sustainability is something that we must do, but it's not going to shape the future because we already know that we must do it, right? So, okay, let's get started with our panel. Let's take a broad perspective first, macroeconomic perspective. It's basically setting the context to understand our growth drivers and trends. These are, some of you may think it's boring, but these are absolutely necessary numbers for us to understand the context in which this panel discussion will be about. So, Mr. Lee, let me come to you first. What do you think are the key socio-economic factors that are driving the current growth in Malaysia's real estate market? And if you can, in a little bit, let us know what the factors, how have these factors evolved in recent years?
Thank you. Can I have my slide, please? I'm going to give you some pointers to identify what are the factors that likely to impact on the trends in the real estate market. And this morning, thanks to Chairman of the UM, my friend Dato Hisham, I think he have really run down to you from the historical perspective how the global forces and also internal forces influence the demand and supply of the real estate market. My slide ready? Okay. So I'm going to, I need to follow to time because our moderator was strict. Yesterday, she texted me. Each of us have 3 minutes to answer the question so that we have more participation from the audience. Yeah, I try my best. Before that, let me... How to go forward? Hey. Oh, something. Sorry. Can you start?
3 minutes.
Okay, now, there are altogether 7 factors. Very quickly summarize it. The first one, demographics. The demographic trends will shape the real estate demand in terms of the interplay between the aging population, urban migration, and the household demand dynamics. That will determine. I think in short, if you look at the slide later, I will share with you, the home ownership in Malaysia is still quite high, 76.9%. And the young cohorts, the Gen Y, Gen Z, the young population, they may think otherwise, why should I own a house? I cannot afford. Affordability is a big question now. So I would like to rent a house. Now, in terms of population growth, you look at Malaysian population growth, it's about 1.1%. We have been, the fertility rates are declining. People are worried now. I think that will impact on your productivity, your labor force participation. That also influences your housing demand. And lastly, aging population. As your aging population, we're talking about 15% by the year 2030 or 2040. So what is the demand? Facility, right? Healthcare facility. The senior elderly living community, that will be demanding in terms of how you want to shape the demand and supply of the housing. And for the young people, talking about you're savvy from technology, your e-commerce, you prefer what in terms of work, remote, working at home. You are not want to have a big space, small space, the working space. So that is also demand for your retail space and commercial. And again, Malaysia, look at Malaysia now, we talk about data center, we are talking about reshoring, friendshoring of all this geopolitical tension. There will be demand for different asset, class, which if you go to Johor, I was Johor in August 17, give a talk about Forest City. The audience is as big as today, 700 people packed. So they're talking about commercial demand is there, all this will influence. Interest rate, obviously, interest rate, stable one. If the interest rate going to go up, OPR, I believe, will remain unchanged, at least up to next year. Despite the US cut the rates, I don't think we'll cut. I think unless there's a big shock in the economy. I think at the moment, interest rate is stable, and I do a check on some of the banks in town. I think the base rate plus whatever, the spread they have is between 3.88% to 4.3% for those who want to borrow. I think you come to my bank, the Bank of China Malaysia, and buy UN property. Now, on economic performance, that is important. You look at only 4 years into the year 2020, what have we seen? 3 shocks. One, pandemic COVID-19. Then you have the war, Ukraine, and the Middle East tension. I'm not a predictor of feng shui, but I think all these shocks will continue, in particular on the geopolitical tension, trade wars, and that will escalate and escalate. Post-US president election, we will see another round of big effect in terms of the technological shift and also the geopolitical shift. And why Malaysia be good? Sweet spot. When all the geopolitical tension, Malaysia is a spot where you come in terms of reshoring and friendshoring. That's why there's a lot of demand happening now in the commercial space, which I'll share with you the trend. Okay. Now, the government policy, obviously, localized. Malaysia, my second home, yeah, revamp, that will help. And public housing affordability, again, that's a big concern. I think, how do you make the housing more affordable, yeah, for the middle income, the B40 to own? But if you can't own, then you just have to rent. I think the mentality have to change for now. And last is about geopolitics. Geopolitics I already cover. Supply chain, economic security. Malaysia is still in the spot as long as we get it right. I think if you look at all the information that we track from MIDA, whether it's approval, actual investment, this time around is happening. It's happening on the ground. Yeah, Infineon opened its first phase of the large, the most powerful 200 millimeter type of silicon pipe for semiconductor, for EV. That is happening on the ground. Yeah. Now, the culture, lifestyle trend, and climate change, I think that's something we are seeing the young population, those who are urban migration, the change of lifestyle preference. I think based on one survey show, lifestyle preference, 71% prioritize access to public transportation, 65% favor on-site F&B, 48% prefer sustainable building features, smart building. So surprisingly, when I check with some of the developer, the builders, the new launches, I ask them, hey, when I walk into the condo that I buy, luxury or mid-range, do we have all the smart feature? And surprisingly, they don't have. And some even say, hey, my charging station are not ready. We don't have that line of the connection. I think all these are, you need to be forward thinking. You need to embrace innovation technology. You're talking about, a smart city, a sustainable type of concept, where the young or the rising preference, they will like to have everything's like plug in together infrastructure. It's not something that you move in, then you start to wiring up here and there with all the unpleasant type of gadgets here and there. So I think this is something we have to think hard, Yes, it's a cost to you, but eventually you can be meeting the trending demand of the young people. I believe the housing sector will still be a cycle. And I think I need to quickly, I think Emmy is looking at me now. But basically, you can look at the prices. Prices now has started to move up. It's still quite slow, but before that, how to go forward? Can you pass me to the next slide? Before that. Okay. Now, this is interesting. You can look at consistently residential, industrial, commercial, and agriculture in terms of volume and value of transaction has trending up. We are seeing, for those who follow me, right after the GST, 2015 onwards, I was very bearish about property market. I was very bearish. I know that we have gone through a consolidation phase. And finally, we start to see some uptick. It could be reflex of certain factors, right? In terms of I think in particular for the last 1 year, as what Dato' Hisham mentioned, you look at the property index in the stock market has surged significantly. And more so now, I think based on the first half of this year, the momentum for the economy in terms of private investment has been very strong. The upturn in the construction sector is very strong. And I think that reflects the general positive confidence of domestic and foreign investor on Malaysia. That's why I keep on harping to the government, you must get it right this time. This time you are in the perfect shooting star. where all the geopolitical tension among the major players, and Malaysia is a spot where people will consider to relocate and find their new places of doing business. SECR, get it right this time around, compared to what you talk about Iskandar, Malaysia, right? So you must make sure you get a good deal between Johor and Singapore and the spillover effect onto other states within the Malaysia. Okay, with that, I just want to share with you the last slide to show you in terms of house price growth index and also the population growth, median household income. Their prices are still unaffordable, reach to the middle and B40. I would urge UN summarize, you build more affordable housing. At the same time, try to balance off so that people will have more home ownership. But you look at the home ownership number on the last column, you can see that in terms of the national has increased by 2 percentage points, and for major cities like KL increase, Selangor decline, and Johor has shown an increase of 3.6%, and Pulau Pinang is about 0.7%. So with that, I end my first question. Sorry for taking much of your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. So I took away 2 key points from your narrative here, from your slides. The main key point, the stars are aligning for Malaysia, it would seem, from the macro perspective. And the second key point, you say that we must build smart homes, technologically savvy homes, because that's what the young generation wants. And on the flip side, it must be affordable. So that's a question for all of us to think about. How do we solve that? So next, coming to you, Charlie, let's talk about how big data is influencing the real estate sector. What insights are you seeing regarding market trends and future developments? Are we seeing smart homes in demand or affordable homes? I somehow feel there are 2 categories.
Yeah, so I would like to rewind the conversation a little bit, so to address some of the key points that Mr. Lee has highlighted as well, just to make it a little bit more flowy. So some people have a large misconception about what big data does, right? Big data is not just taking data and then have large amounts of it, okay? I mean, the word big is part of it. Yes, large amounts of it. But the main key technological leapfrog that we have done in the last 5 to 10 years is what Sufyan showed. When we're talking about innovation, what big data has and AI has allowed us to do is now we are able to process large amounts of data across large amount of spaces in the speed that is unprecedented. It is a kind of innovation that we don't think about in terms of like a new technology, like how fast we're getting our information on our phone. Is the same with big data. Previously, if you think about how property development was done since the Pompeii times, it is an intuition way of doing things. We've all had that phase in the roaring 1990s where decisions are done by gut feel. And gut feel is not really gut feel, right? You're taking large amounts of data, you're processing it in your head, and then you're making a decision to impact to the city. What big data does today, you're able to cover a larger amount of space to do that. Something like the Johor Southern region, you're able to process large amounts of data instead of just your little landscape. 2, you're able to do it at a speed that nobody could think about before. Before, we are looking at maps, physical printed maps. Now, click of a finger, you can get this data, right? The third part of it, and I think this is underestimated, is for establishments of big property developers, you have more than one person making a decision. You have many, many people. And the power of big data and the technology that we're doing is the leapfrog in coordination and the vision alignment. So if you think about Sufyan's chart just now about the plane versus the house, how many parts go into a plane? That's possible because of technology. And today, we're still at the point where we're building houses by houses, and we're not going towards the modular way of prefab because we're not using this kind of big data coordination in the way that we are supposed to. And we need to change that mindset, right, in order to do that. So if you talk about trends, etc., I wanted to share with you a very concrete example. We talk about the stars alignment. Remember just now, Mr. Lee was saying, stars are aligning, but stars are also misaligning as fast as they align. So we are in a constant state of change, which means that you need the big data in order to tell you what's happening moment to moment, real time, in order for you to respond in time. Because yes, it's aligned today, but is it going to be misaligned tomorrow, next week, 3 weeks from now? So a concrete example is how we use mobile data. So a lot of people are very excited about Johor now, as we should be. And one of the big things is that, oh, it's so expensive in Singapore. You know, housing is so expensive. The Singaporeans are going to be a big fuel of all the property purchases that's going to come to Johor, right? So is that really happening? And today, we have the technology, mobile data technology, for us to see, is there really inflow between Singapore to Malaysia? Is there real price arbitrage between Singapore and Malaysia? And my favorite index today is the whiskey index. I know some people know that I do a little bit of drinking, but so the whiskey index is interesting to me because a lot of the inflow that's coming in from Singapore actually comes as an after effect or secondary effect from China, right? So there was a lot of capital flow that came from China to Singapore after, after COVID. There was some capital inflow coming, and that drove up whiskey prices, apartment prices, and also the volume of automobile that was being sold in Singapore. As a consequence, we have then a backflow of property prices and property purchases in Johor. Today, if you look at Singapore, whiskey prices has gone down. I like, but maybe not so great as a signal indicator. So big data is something that we're not just looking at, or do people want smart homes or, how da-da-da-da. It is this kind of macroeconomic, like geopolitical movements, how people are consuming, where people are spending their money. That's going to be your canary in what's going to happen to property prices. So that's my little answer to geo-behavioral analytics that we do, but we also hope that property developers will start looking at these indicators, because when you build a property, it takes 2 years for a landed property. It's 4 years when you, or 36 months if you're doing it at a high rise. So looking 3, 4, 5, 7 years ahead is actually our job. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. That's quite interesting to hear, because I'd like to know from your data, are they actually buying properties? But we'll come back to you because Christophe is there waiting. I wanted to ask Christophe about the transitional new world order that we have right now. We are decoupling from globalization now, as we all know. And what do you have in place? Protectionism policies, all currently in place, especially led by the rule maker, the once rule maker, US, who are right now, I think, the rule breaker, withdrawing very much from the global scene and then causing ripples throughout the world. So, Christophe, what impact do you think global geopolitical tensions are having directly on Malaysia's real estate sector, particularly regarding foreign direct investment?
One word, positive. I think Malaysia has benefited from what we call more commonly the trade war between China and US, some other geopolitical challenges around the world. On one side, protected, as Malaysia is not geographically located in Europe or in US or in China, obviously. We've seen a regain of interest and a regain on investment from the affected parties with this US-China challenges. The China plus one is real. In Malaysia, we are seeing, and somebody already mentioned that is meeting Chinese investor on a regular basis. We do. We do a lot of research and data report on why invest in Malaysia, because we have also a bit of a competition in Southeast Asia. Malaysia is not the only market that is looked at. The price of real estate in Malaysia is increasing versus some of our neighbors, and this creates a bit of a conversation when we're looking at business plan and investment plan. What Malaysia has benefit from is definitely logistic and warehousing from China. This can be Chinese company looking at business continuity planning outside of China, and also foreign companies in China looking at BCP, led by COVID, led by rising labor cost in China, and obviously the geopolitical tension. Maybe repeating why Malaysia. Yes, there are some challenges. Yes, we are sometimes lacking perhaps the global view on what a good investment is when we are attracting newcomers, especially. We definitely have language skill, very skilled labor. Even if we have some hiccups, a reliable grid and electricity supply, cost of power is reasonable, there is land, and there is a perceived improved regulatory and legislation environment. And one thing that Malaysia, coming from Philippines, don't have is natural hazard. You don't have earthquake, you don't have a cyclone, you don't have volcanoes, which in all that contribute, riding also on the other panelists' talk, we are in a good place. However, we need to think about boosting and gaining more investment from our competing neighbors. And there is still a bit of work to do on seeing Malaysia as a natural choice when an external investor look at investment. Malaysia to be at the table. They may not win all the investment, but at least ensure that Malaysia is asked to bid into bracket for the investment.
Right, thank you, Christophe. So what I took away from that was that Malaysia is geographically very strategic. We have no major hazards, like you say. We just need to build bigger stormwater drains. Okay, right, Mr. Lee, because we are talking about geopolitics, right? And these trends actually reshape trade dynamics, investment strategies. But what I'd like to ask you, Mr. Lee, is are there any specific risks that the real estate sector is underestimating?
I mentioned just now, if you look at in 4 years within the 2020, you have 3 events, right? Crisis, pandemic 19, and the ongoing war persistently in Ukraine, and the other one is the Middle East tension. So I think if you ask me what are the big risks, I look at from the macro data, I think the first one is the global debt problem. And global debt now, as of February this year, is about US 313 trillion. US now is about 35 trillion. There's balloon to the extent, if one day everyone just dump the dollar and buy ringgit, buy renminbi, the crashing of the dollar, how would that impact on the financial market? Okay, one problem. Second, I mentioned also, geopolitical tension will continue to escalate and deepen as more countries are involving in all these trends. And that is something that we have to watch out, because it could just temper the global economy. And in terms of the direction of the interest rate and inflation, I think, yes, we are happy that finally, that once inflation has come down, but it's not the end yet. I mean, there's still risk in terms of shock in the financial market, commodity prices, that could also revive back the risk of inflation. I think interest rate definitely on the path of declining. That is good for Malaysia in the sense that it helps ringgit. I think ringgit has a very good performance since June until now, up 9.3%. Last 2 days has weakened back a bit, but I think we have finally found a level for ringgit to stabilize. And also the event we are talking about China, I think which I didn't highlight. I think China is something that we have to watch out because they are undergoing the real property stress. And despite effort by the China government to stabilize, I think some of the numbers are still not showing signs of revival in the property sector. They have gone through the stage like US subprime, Malaysia. Thanks goodness, I think from 2015 onwards, we start to consolidate gradually. We do not have to have a big shock to give a big crash to the property market. Yes, we experienced, if you look at the slide that I showed you just now, I think in 08, 09 global financial crisis and also the pandemic, and also during the period where Fed tantrum between the 2013 to 2015, we saw the property transaction data was a bit bad. I mean, not too good, but it has started to stabilize and recover gradually. I think most importantly, we must get the right policy in place, execution, which I will touch on later in terms of regulatory requirement, processes of investment in the real estate, whether the timing, I mean, the application time for the foreign investor to buy property. I think I also like to, if that we have time to discuss, then we will bring up the issue about compliance costs, which our center also work closely with REDA and our committee of property. We have submitted quite a number of measures to the Pemuda to look into how to further streamline the regulatory process and also the application process for the foreign investment in the real estate. We'll come to that later.
Right, thank you, Mr. Lee. It sounds like a very stressful time right now, right, with all this geopolitics that's happening. But do you know what your therapist would say? Things you can control, things you can't control. So you can't control the geopolitics. What you can control is what's happening in our country. So fix our own house first, right? So, okay. Let's come back to you, Charlie, about demographics. So I really like demographics because to me, demographics is what they say, blueprint of the future, right? And it's predictable. In today's time, I love predictability. So the fact that demographics is predictable, let's just take a step back and take a look at what I mean by that, right? So you see, I took a few stats here about demographics. About aging, let's talk about aging first. 25% of males who are aged between 70 to 75 are still working. Let's consider that. And then if we talk about labor, just plug something from, let's say, nurse. How many nurses? One nurse per 1,000 population. Is that enough? Is that not enough? Do we solve that with migration? Would migration solve any of these problems? We talk about China, the emergence of 40 to 70-year-old. They are your high spenders. Are they spending? We have a very educated workforce right now in the world. Let's talk about also healthcare. There's also an investment perspective to it now. There's senior living. And it's also not about just older demographics, not just the aging ones, but also about household formation, right? Your DINKs, your double income, no kids, smaller households, extended families who are still living together. So all these in place. So Charlie, with Malaysia's aging population, the rise of a very tech-savvy younger population who should be our property buyers, should be, is the real estate market adapting quickly enough to meet these demographic shifts? And what are the risks that developers have if they are not aligning with the demands of this generation?
Thanks for the question. I think you painted a very interesting picture about how globally some of our biggest consumers are actually changing, right? And on your question about aging and then honing back to Mr. Lee's charts, right, about home ownership. So one thing about aging population in Malaysia that people don't talk about is that of that 70% home ownership, what happens to those houses when these people are not around? We are looking at the largest generation in Malaysia that will inherit a home, I think in the next 20 years, 10, 20 years, is going to be the largest number of folks who is going to be born with a house. Because either they inherit it from their parents or they inherit land. And honing in on that, if you think about it, what happens to all those homes if everybody buys a new house or vice versa? So I think that's one question that property developers have to start thinking. It is not unprecedented. So if you look at all the aging societies, developed nations, Japan, Korea, Europe, they all had this problem. So solutions are already around. Take a look at it and see how have real estate developers evolved in those countries to adapt to this new generation of aging and inheritance, right? One. Second, the tax savviness is actually a little bit of a risk for real estate developers. Why? Previously, a lot of home development or housing development is a function of knowledge. Okay, I could do this better, faster, cheaper, safer, right? So a real estate developer was previously, I mean, in the 1990s. The idea is to provide society with the largest number of housing, lowest number of cost, at the fastest speed. I'm able to do all these things because I have engineers, architects, I could do all this safely. I can talk to DBKL, right? A lot of people cannot talk to DBKL. As we become more tech savvy, a lot of people actually get a lot of knowledge at the tip of ChatGPT. How do I apply for my home renovation from DBKL? How do I buy a modular home from China and ship it in my reserve Melayu land that I inherited from my atuk? That is real, right? People are experimenting, people are learning very, very quickly. So if you think about real estate developer, you have to start thinking about what is your advantage, what is your USP. It is no longer I'm able to hire, I'm able to land bank, which is half my clients, I have land bank, but it is beyond that. You have to almost lead. You have almost to lead the new generation of what Ms. Lee was saying. Can I affect how you transport by taking EV chargers in your house? Can I dictate that? Or can I lead that? Can I plan my townships better, where it is walkable, where there is shade, where it is climate resilient, where, as a property developer, you can now safeguard your buyers from flooding, from climate change. I can make better decisions around how I treat the soil, how I treat the forest, how I'm going to safeguard your townships for future value. It is no longer a competition around price per square foot. Can I build the price per square foot cheaper than the next guy and then buy it from me, right? That's not enough, I think, in the next tech-savvy buyer, because the tech-savvy buyer of young generation who inherited land or house has a chance of actually outcompeting you in price per square foot construction. So I think that's one of the things that people should take into account when they're thinking about this.
Thank you, Charlie. I think that's very good, especially regarding sustainability in the long run, resilience, what we're building right now, which brings me very nicely into the next section. Remember, I had a few things to cover, yeah, and I have 16 minutes left. Please get the questions coming in. I don't see any yet in my Slido iPad. So, okay, let's talk about regulatory reforms because it's budget wish list season right now. So let's go there. Regulatory changes, they are beneficial, I think, sometimes, especially in Malaysia. And I think it's essential for long-term growth and sustainability in the real estate sector. And what I mean here by sustainability doesn't just mean green, yeah? It means resilience, durability, long-term stability. So, okay, Mr. Lee, can I come to you? Do you believe that Malaysia's current regulatory framework is sufficient to support the real estate sector? And what reforms would you suggest to attract more FDI?
Okay, to answer this question, I bring this book. This is a very good one, studied by Reda, together with CIBD. And this is the first exhibit, if you want to get into a debate on how government can further streamline the regulatory requirement and processes for the real estate sector, and they've been championing for this for many decades. Fortunately, I joined the center, SERC, 7 years ago, and I get to know all the problems faced by the real estate player, because we have one Tan Sri Teo Chang Kok. He's the committee chairman, and I learned a lot from him. So I think if you look at, to be fair, Malaysia in terms of the regulatory, in terms of the policy to encourage foreign investment in the real estate sector, we are quite liberal compared to other countries, right? We have, for example, when you buy a property, there's a threshold, 1 million, and it differs from different states. But if you do a quick check in terms of the state approval, you have to get the state approval before you purchase, and it takes at least 2 months, some 3 months. You know, it varies between 2 to 3 months based on my check with the legal advice, lawyers. And the other thing that we also notice when it comes to development permits for those who are builders, when you submit the planning permission, the timeline could take about at least 300 days. And for building plan approval, up to 92 days. We are talking about under the OSC. For those who are not familiar with OSC, one-stop center, which is under the Kerajaan Tempatan, yeah, PPT. So they try to further streamline. They have OSC 2, now they are on OSC 3. So we are still working together with Pemuda and MPC closely to further reduce it and streamline it and make it more simplified, yeah, for in terms of the processes and for the time taken to approve the foreign or even the foreign investment, and also the builders to submit their plans for approval. And if you look at under OSC 3, if the approval time for 6 months pre-consultation without plans, without local plans, is 272 days, and some project, large one, involve a lot of involvement with the local authority, it could be even higher than that. And based on the CIBD report, the whole sector is somewhat over-regulated because it involves at least 14 acts and various regulation, policy, and guidelines. So this is area that we really have to sit down and work together with the local council, the state government, federal. From federal side, I think we know we want to further cut down, streamline. But when it comes to the state government, the local authority, that is a big problem. If we can work together, CIBD, REDA, with all the builders, we can achieve certain performance in terms of how to further streamline that. So with this, and I want to bring up one issue about compliance costs. Not just a capital contribution. As a developer, nowadays, you not bought your master plan, you have to, for electricity, the water, ever since they corporatize, everything is passed through. And that has increased the cost of compliance and capital completion cost. And to give you an example, it's about 21.8% to 32% of the GDP for township, of which 6 to 9% is due to loss of sellable land, given that 60% of land shall be surrendered, and 1.5 to 2% is to capital contribution. Yeah? And 0.5 to 1.5% is a holding cost as a result of delay in approvals. So I think with all this technology, innovation, AI, big data, I think all this will have to further utilize by all the agencies involved in the regulatory of the property real estate. That will help to reduce the time, resources. I think you can submit online, but you still need to go physically to submit all the document. What's the purpose? You ask them why? Because it's policy procedure. So these are things that we should look into and help to streamline and make it more in terms of effectiveness of the processes and help to grow the real estate sector. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. So it's about streamlining processes. without affecting the quality of what we build? Okay, Christophe, can I come to you since we were talking about technology and today's hot topic in Malaysia, data centers. I know we have another session on that later. So just one question for you, Christophe. So given the increasing demand for data centers and other industrial developments, so this is a big question, yeah. Do you believe that Malaysia is at risk of prioritizing this industrial growth at the expense of residential and commercial sustainability?
Wow. I don't personally, in view of my almost 3 years in Malaysia, I think there is a natural investment development. And also when we say data center, we seems to kind of miss a bit more the bigger picture. This is about digital transformation. It's about human digital experience. It's about the investment coming into Malaysia the last 4 or 5 years, the new investment. And I like ecosystem because it reflects more the question on data center. For me, data center is part of a bigger ecosystem, new investment. We were lucky with a moratorium from Singapore. This has kind of a boost. Malaysia put it on a global scene. It's a secondary market for data center, very successful. But also the data center are fueling the higher demand for manufacturing. Data center are processing more personal data. I mean, when we see the usage of internet app in Malaysia, it's staggering. Digital transformation, human transformation, corporate government, utilization of technology, big data, blockchain. I mean, one of the things that could solve the issue of regulatory complexity is introduce blockchain, that everybody feels safe, transparent. And for me, it's not imbalanced yet. And ultimately, the more data center, the more manufacturing investment, the more development, you will need talent to work in this new investment. They will need residential. You will need some office space. You will need to build office space. Jane, it's more a holistic ecosystem view of the data center that a small part, I would say, of the new type of investment that Malaysia is receiving.
Right, thank you. So that means that data center is just making headlines. The media is just making it big because it sells papers. But data centers are only a small part of the component of an entire ecosystem within our real estate sector. So, okay, apparently I was holding the wrong iPad. That's why there were no questions. We actually now have 15 questions to be answered in 7 minutes, so that's almost impossible. Let's just take the question with the highest votes right now. Okay, panelists, this is not pre-prepared, right? So I don't know if you want to, if you can flash the Slido questions up. Otherwise, let me just read it out for the one with the highest votes. This is about FDI versus DDI, domestic investments. So FDI is probably attracted by political stability and Malaysia's neutrality in not picking sides in any fights. So is there any comment? Does the panelists have any comment about DDI or competition to our local SMEs? This question came from Heng ST Research. Mr. Lee, do you want to answer that? Yes.
I can take the question because our center had done the paper proposal to government after the COVID to emphasize on the need. While we welcome FDI, we must also equally supporting the DDI. DDI is a domestic direct investment. If you look at the last 3 years approval data by MIDA, investment approval into the manufacturing sector, services, primary sector, including real estate, I think the ratio is quite quite good. I think DDI approval close to about, if I'm not mistaken, about close to 50%. Yeah, it fluctuates between the FDI ratio versus the DDI. That is a very important emphasis to the government, that we also make sure FDI come in. The SME, in particular, they are about 98.6% of the total country industry establishment. They need to be inclusive and part of the supply chain. I think we are seeing that, but we want more. We want more from that, because we don't want them to be sidelined, and we are just only talking about the FDI. In our paper to the government, we have conducted a very intensive survey with some of the captains of the local industry, and they also share what they think the government can do in terms of transmission of the technology transfer, supply chain, local procurement. These are the things that we are pushing for government, and rightfully, I think we are happy to note that Khazanah is mandated as part of the GLC to drive the DDI. I think recently they announced 120 billion, 6 GLC, and Khazanah is one of them. And they have the Dana Impact, and also their focus is not just about high technology, but they also want to make sure that DI will be given a fair share in terms of driving the whole transformation of the country. When you talk about NIMP, you talk about NETA, you talk about National Semiconductor Strategy, and I believe there are places for the domestic SME to participate, and you can see that happening. I mean, you look at Penang, there's a lot of these SME. They used to be supplier to the MNC. They are coming out now. They are listed in the stock market, and there are a lot of icon names that we feel that we, SME, if we are given all the support in terms of fiscal incentive, financing, skill, talent. Talent is the big challenge in terms of how do we work together in the ecosystem, and the DDI and FDI equally important. No one can say I is more important than you, but based on our survey, appears that some of the state government appears to be more favor FDI in terms of the KPI. So we are so happy that some of the proposals we put forward to the government have taken into account, and now the MIDA will also have a KPI for the DDI, right? And there will be, existingly they have strategic domestic fund to support the DDI, and we want more in terms of the support and facilitation, and everyone, two investors are equally important in the context of Malaysia. Thank you.
Definitely for a holistic economy, right? And I'm glad to hear the positivity in that, the fact that domestic direct investment is still being favored and emphasized. Okay, the next question is about man-made accidents. In our latest trending news, in view of recent disasters, sinkholes, etc., blamed on bad urban planning and intensive developments, how do you expect development trends will change? There are 28 clicks for this question to be answered. Who would like to take this question about recent disasters and how do we think development trends will change? Charlie?
Yeah. So one of the things that technology is already available, but regulators are not responding. So I wanted to also respond to Mr. Lee's comment just now about regulation, right? So the industry is evolving, but we are highly regulated, right? The regulators themselves have a difficulty sort of being dynamic about the situation. So climate change is happening in the next 10 years. Till today, I don't have one local council in Malaysia who actually factor in climate change as part of their development approvals, right, at this point. So yes, locally on their land, but not on a macro level, not on a global scale, for sure. So one of the things that we will definitely see is regulators will have more and more pressure to use big data. And one of the biggest thing that I have been advocating is supply and demand. Today, local councils are not tracking currently the speed in which the supply is needed in the market. So they are looking at it on a regulatory point, like what Mr. Lee was saying. Oh, does it have this policy? Does it checkpoint the bomba? Does it have, I don't know, fire escape? Da, 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 da. So there's this like really long list. That's what's causing overregulation, because the zooming out on looking at the health of the ecosystem as a whole is kind of lost in translation, lost in the SOP per se. So more and more regulator is going to change that, and if they are able to do that, we will then expect higher quality construction, higher quality developments, and no longer a race to the cheapest price per square foot construction. And that will be good for all of us, because that means we will have better quality products, better quality real estates that's investable internationally. At the same time, provide the economy that boosts that it needs to do, versus overdevelopment. But what I like to end with is disposable housing. I'm seeing a lot of disposable housing being built in our environment. And to be very honest, I don't know how long those will last, 10 years, 15 years, definitely not up to Pompeii. So that's not something that we hope to have given climate change.
Disposable housing. That would take centuries to disintegrate. Right? Okay, right. Let me just come, because the alarm is going to ring in a short while, I think. So let me just come with a quick round-robin conclusion. Christophe, and for all panelists, if you could recommend just one crucial strategy in maybe 10 words or less, one crucial strategy for the stakeholders in this room in Malaysia's real estate sector to effectively navigate the challenges of market demands, sustainability, the evolving regulations, whether they are investors, developers, policymakers, what would it be and why? One crucial strategy.
Pure real estate, for me, a supranational body who would supervise more land availability for commercial use. It's
more commercial land.
It's very individual, it's very regional, it's very city. There is an opportunity to boost the investment, and foreign investment or DDI, we need more land for the real estate. Within the caveat, not as everybody does whatever they want. There is a clear strategy, national strategy, because there is lots of government land that are hardly available for foreign investors, for good reason or different reason. Have more land availability, because Malaysia will need it.
Have more land available that's properly regulated, right? Thank you, Christophe. And Charlie, one crucial strategy.
I think one of the crucial strategy that I would like to have is at least for us to measure supply and demand on a fundamental basis that is across all board synced, right? One of the major things that currently that we all don't have is we don't measure vacancy. In Malaysia is one of the, I think the last semi-developed real estate market that doesn't measure vacancy. And I would really hope to see that in the near future.
So for you, it's about understanding where real estate currently sits, and then we can plan.
I think efficiency.
Solve the problems. Okay.
Because resources is not infinite, right? We all know this. We just don't want to admit it. And at one point, we will start to look at efficiency instead of never-ending resources. Yeah.
Thank you, Charlie. And Mr. Lee, one crucial strategy.
One is the one thing from government: streamline the regulatory requirement, policy and guideline governing the real estate industry. Simple. Get the execution, listen to the industry engagement, and try to make it easier for the industry player to in the market. Okay.
So if we have policymakers in the room, take some notes, please. So, okay, as a researcher, let me just wrap this whole thing up. And my point of view, I think it's increasingly difficult, actually, to look at numbers and expect it to mean something, although Charlie may disagree. So I hope as this panel kickstarts this morning's conference, I hope we were able to throw you some food for thought, maybe help you to put some form to the future. And all of us in this room, we are all looking to create value in a new world of high interest rates, high inflation, fluctuating supply-demand dynamics, very volatile geopolitical environment. So let's all think about controlling the narrative with what we have taken away from this panel. Think about opportunities for new sectors of growth. Because if the question is real estate investment dead? I will let you know that the capital has to go somewhere. So consider, are you solving an economic need? Housing is an economic need. If you're not solving that economic need, then whatever you're doing or building will just lead towards a bubble. So, okay, key takeaway, future is unpredictable. Thank you very much for our panelists and participants for a lively and insightful discussion. Hope you guys have a useful conference ahead. Thank you.